Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're putting on our digital detective hats to investigate a truly modern mystery. It's a wild story about memory, artificial intelligence, and honestly, the incredibly fragile nature of the internet. We're going to forensically reconstruct a completely lost piece of digital art, a 2013 mobile game known to a select few simply as Zombie Sheep.
So, can a lost video game be entirely rebuilt from just one single childhood memory? It's a fascinating question, right? Imagine a game you played obsessively as a kid. Now imagine trying to look it up today, only to realize that search engines return absolutely zero results. The indexes are just completely blank. The game simply does not exist online anymore. Well, that is exactly what happened to hardware developer Maximus Cup. He had this vivid structural memory of an unindexed mobile game from around 2013. And, refusing to accept that it was just gone forever, Maximus actually partnered up with an AI to meticulously extract his memories. They mapped out the game's logic constraints, layer by layer, to basically pull this title right back from the digital void.
But you might be wondering, how does a fully published commercial piece of software just vanish? Well, welcome to the crime scene, an event that digital archivists call the Windows Phone Purge. Back in the early 2010s, Microsoft was actively incentivizing indie developers to port their games to the Windows Phone marketplace. But when Microsoft officially discontinued the operating system in 2017, the storefront was just taken offline. The servers hosting the compiled game files were wiped completely clean. And because Windows Phone was a much smaller ecosystem, standard internet web crawlers, like the Wayback Machine, had entirely bypassed these dead storefront files. The metadata was purged to optimize search engine space, basically leaving the game without a single digital footprint.
All right, Section 1, the Nagano Anomaly.
To figure out what we actually lost, we have to look at the prime suspect behind the code, developer Seiji Nagano. His name was found buried in some early archival hints. Now, what's really interesting about this is the sheer evolutionary leap it reveals. If you look at the known catalog, the official internet record says Seiji Nagano only made simple, flat, pixel art side-scrollers and sheep-counting sleep aids, primarily for a local Japanese audience. But Maximus's structural memory proved something entirely different. Zombie Sheep was a massive, unindexed leap in Nagano's career. It was a multi-lane, top-down tactical defense game. It used premium vector art, featured complex weapon arrays, and was fully localized in English. Because this absolute magnum opus stepped completely out of his traditional pixel art catalog, automated archive scrapers missed it entirely. It was categorized incorrectly, which effectively rendered it invisible.
Moving right along to Section 2, Anatomy of the Zombie Sheep.
So, relying entirely on memory, Maximus and his AI partner performed a literal digital autopsy to reconstruct this aesthetic. They mapped out a premium vector art style defined by these thick, smooth, black digital ink outlines and vibrant color fills. I mean, this wasn't your generic pixelated green zombie. This was a highly specific anatomical fingerprint. The dossier updates confirmed the sheep had normal white wool, but it was heavily contrasted by localized bright red cartoon blood splatters. Unsettlingly, the sheep featured a human-like peach skin tone on its face and legs. The eyes were distinctly human eyeballs, heavily bagged, totally exhausted, and pointing sharply upward in this vacant stare. The jaw hung wide open, exposing a ragged bottom row of zombie-like teeth with a drooping pink tongue. This precise, hyper-specific detail is our verifiable digital blueprint.
And here is a detail that truly proves the authenticity of the memory. The game used this incredibly ingenious 2D design shortcut. The sheep sprite itself was actually drawn in a side profile facing to the right, but on the screen, its physical pathing marched continuously downward. This was a really clever trick that allowed the developer to show a highly detailed, expressive face without the massive memory overhead of drawing complex top-down walking animations.
Okay, Section 3, 5-lane defense mechanics.
With the visual blueprint completely locked, the investigation shifted to how this game actually played. And this brilliantly illustrates the core mechanical challenge. Look at the downward y-axis variable here. The game field, which was optimized for portrait mobile screens, was split into exactly 5 vertical lanes, separated by light brown wooden fence posts. The zombie sheep would spawn at the absolute top of the y-axis and march relentlessly downward. Anchored at the very bottom center of the screen was your character, the farmer, facing upward, and you'd pivot to defend whichever lane you happened to tap.
Now, to survive, you didn't just mash buttons, you had to manage a really deep, highly strategic ammunition economy. You had your primary rocks for basic kinetic damage,
You had blueberries, which were a high-tier projectile that covered the sheep in a blue splat and inflicted a heavy speed reduction. You could deploy a water bucket directly onto a lane, literally transforming the green vector grass into a dark mud puddle that slowed enemies down to a grueling 30% velocity. And then there was the carrot. So the crucial point is that the carrot wasn't a weapon that knocked enemies backward, it was a stationary decoy. When you placed it, approaching sheep would halt entirely just to eat it, giving you a vital temporal stall to focus your attack somewhere else.
Let's move to Section 4, the henhouse fail state, and see how this builds.
Let's see how all of this builds into the game's actual stakes. I mean, why is the farmer throwing blueberries at undead livestock in the first place? And what happens if you miss? Well, before you even threw a single rock, the game delivered its narrative through a sequential, 3-panel comic intro that dynamically popped in. This was a brilliant memory-saving trick for early mobile hardware. Panel 1 showed a peaceful, sunny farm. Panel 2, an anomalous infection event where the sheep's eyes mutate upward and a glitched text box just reads, "Bah." In Panel 3, the farmer equips his rocks, establishing the ultimate objective: protect the farm.
And what exactly was he protecting? The henhouse, located directly behind him. This was the unforgettable breach protocol. If your defenses failed and a sheep managed to reach the absolute bottom coordinate of a lane, all hell broke loose. A loud, frantic audio file of screaming, panicking chickens would trigger, accompanied by this chaotic visual burst of white and gray feathers exploding right out of the henhouse doors. This resulted in an immediate depletion of your health bar. It was a seriously chaotic, high-stress perimeter defense.
Finally, Section 5, the Preservation Roadmap.
So we have the mechanics, the art, and the progression completely mapped out by human memory and AI synthesis. But is it actually real? To find out, Maximus took this entire dossier to the broader digital preservation community. And guys, this is where you literally get goosebumps. A Spanish-speaking Reddit user named efficient_chest_4734 replied to the findings. Their crowdsourced testimony perfectly validated everything the investigation had synthesized. They remembered the screaming chickens, the comic panels, and even specifically recalled the water bucket leaving mud traps, proving without a doubt that these mechanics weren't just AI hallucinations. They were active scripts written into a globally distributed codebase. The game was real.
With that validation secured, the final phase of this explainer is the definitive action plan for preservation. The roadmap is super clear here. First, digital archivists need to meticulously scrape dead Russian and Chinese storefront mirrors for the specific package identifier Marble Sinjin. If the physical compiled binary can be found, the original vector files can be extracted. But even if it's never found, the logic in this dossier is so comprehensive now that developers can literally code a one-to-one recreation, porting it directly to custom hardware like the Maxo handheld console to ensure it is playable once again.
If a piece of digital art can completely vanish from the internet, what else have we already lost? The rescue of zombie sheep is an absolute triumph, but it leaves us with a pretty haunting realization. Think about it. This fully localized, intricately designed piece of interactive art was completely erased by a simple corporate server wipe. It took a childhood memory and advanced AI just to prove it ever existed. It really makes you wonder, as platforms die and storefronts close forever, what other masterpieces have silently slipped into the digital void, just waiting for someone to simply remember them? Keep your memories sharp, folks. You never know what history you might be holding on to.